You are performing this repair at your own risk. You cannot be held responsible for any injuries to yourself or damage done to your device while attempting a repair. For this repair, we'll need 2 metal pry tools, small Phillips, small flathead, pre-cut double-sided adhesive strips for applying our new glass, a heat gun, which we'll use to soften the adhesive, holding the current glass in place, allowing us to remove it, and of course, our replacement screen. A few other suggested but optional items are thick rubber gloves, which will not only protect your hands while removing the glass, but also prevent fingerprints from getting on the inside of the glass and the LCD screen, at least 10 small plastic clamps for allowing the new glass to set with the adhesive, and superglue gel, which will apply in between the double-sided tape and the replacement glass for a stronger bond. Be sure your device is powered down before continuing. Take your heat gun and apply heat around the perimeter of the glass. Keep the heat gun moving. Don't hold it in one spot too long because that could cause damage. But heat is going to be our most important element here for removing the glass. We need to keep it nice and hot, which will get the adhesive extra tacky and allow us to cleanly pry up the old glass. While prying underneath the glass, there are some areas where you should be cautious. The first isn't quite a danger zone, but it is the location of the digitizer cable. Since we're replacing the glass in this video anyway, it's not quite a danger spot because if we damage that cable, it's not a big deal. The next is the location of the Wi-Fi antenna. Now this is the most commonly damaged cable when removing the glass. It might not be a bad idea to purchase a cable, as they're pretty cheap, along with your replacement glass if you plan to do this on your own. Another spot is a front-facing camera, which is located at the top center. On opposite sides of the camera, there will be 2 3G antennas if you have the 3G version. These will be absent if you have the Wi-Fi only version, so you won't need to worry about them. We'll be demonstrating the glass removal in just a minute, but here's a look on the inside. We have our Wi-Fi antenna, the area of the home button assembly. Working our way up to the top, we have the 2 3G antennas. Here's one and the other, and the front-facing camera in between these 2 antennas. And here's a look at how close the LCD comes to the edge on the left side of the device. We'll be prying in between the plastic bezel and the front glass, not in between the back metal casing and the bezel. It's usually a good idea to replace the bezel at the same time as the glass, but it's not necessary. When prying under the glass, you should keep the metal pry tool level with the glass. If you don't, the glass will further crack and make the repair much more difficult. While applying heat, you should heat the entire perimeter of the glass. Heat, pry, heat, pry. It's going to be a sequence. You should have focused more on the area that you're currently prying in though. Make sure that area is extra hot so the adhesive is the most soft. Heat is the #1 important element in removing the glass. Be sure to keep it extra hot. But keep the heat gun moving, because if you keep it in one area too long, you can risk damaging your iPad. We're going to begin by prying on the right side of the iPad. Initially, you won't be able to keep your metal pry tool level. You'll have to first wedge it underneath the glass in between the bezel and the glass. But after that, you should be able to keep it level and slide it along that side of the glass, whichever side you're working on. If you find that the metal pry tool is not sliding along the edge very easily, you probably need to apply more heat. It can also be very helpful to use one metal pry tool as a space holder to keep the glass slightly raised, and the second tool to slide along the side that you're working on. We'll now work our way around the top portion of the iPad. Remember to be careful of the 2 3G antennas and the front-facing camera. If you have the Wi-Fi only version, these antennas will not be present. With the glass freed from the adhesive up top, we'll work our way along the left side of the iPad. On this side, the LCD comes very close to the edge of the glass. We have about ½ an inch distance between the LCD and the outer edge of the iPad. So don't insert your metal pry tool very far on this side. No more than ½ inch. Continuing along, we'll free the glass from its adhesive on the final side of the iPad, the bottom. Avoid prying in the area of the home button. To the right of the home button, we have the Wi-Fi antenna. the most commonly damaged cable. Be careful when prying in this area. On the left side of the home button, there are no obstructions to worry about, so you can pry freely. With the glass free from the adhesive on all four sides, we can begin to open the glass towards the left like a book. Don't force the glass up. If it's stuck in one area, either heat up that area or pry in that area with your metal tool. The glass is somewhat flexible, so it's okay if it bends. If you find yourself having to apply quite a bit of force, chances are you need to free the adhesive from the glass in some area. Finally, the glass is free from the adhesive, and we can open it up to the left, carefully, just like a book. Do not touch the LCD screen, which is a black square located underneath the glass. Any fingerprints or adhesive that gets on here will be very difficult to remove. Dust is okay, and we can use our compressed air canister to clean off the LCD before we apply the new glass. Next, use your small Phillips screwdriver and remove the 4 Phillips screws being pointed out here. These 4 screws hold the LCD in place. The digitizer cable, which is attached to the front glass, plugs in underneath of the LCD screen. Thus, we need to remove the LCD in order to access this port. With the 4 screws removed, we can use our small flathead screwdriver and get underneath the metal screw mounts attached to the LCD. You should lift from both metal screw brackets on the right side of the iPad, and this will allow us to lift the LCD out from its snug fit inside the device. We can't completely separate the LCD from the iPad. It's still connected by a cable, and we'll need to release the 2 tabs in order to slide that cable out from its port. Carefully flip the screen over as shown and rest it on your hand, which is either wearing a rubber glove or has a cloth covering it. Touching the surface directly with your fingers will get oil on it, which is near impossible to remove. To remove the LCD cable, begin by peeling back the tape covering the cable and the logic board port. This can be accomplished using your plastic pry tool. It's not necessary to salvage this tape, as the cable is held into its port with tension, which leads us to our next step. Using a small flathead screwdriver, get beneath the center of the black tab and carefully twist. This plastic tab should now sit in the vertical direction, releasing the tension, holding the LCD cable in its port. We're now free to carefully grab the LCD cable and slide it out from its port. Here's a look at our LCD screen, which will now set in a safe place off to the side. Our next task is to unplug a digitizer cable. This cable plugs in identical to the LCD, except that the cable splits at the end and goes into 2 separate ports. So instead of one like the LCD, we'll be flipping up 2 separate tabs before we can release the cable. As before, we'll start by removing the tape, which is covering the digitizer cable and its port on the logic board. Next, just like with the LCD port, we'll take our small flathead screwdriver, get beneath the black tab, and give it a gentle twist. That'll flip these tabs in the vertical direction, releasing the tension, holding that cable inside both of its ports. Now the digitizer cable is stuck to the bottom of the casing with adhesive. So we'll have to peel it away from its adhesive and work our way up towards the port before we can slide out the cable, just like we did with the LCD. This cable is a little more tricky to unplug, as there isn't much room in between the edge of the casing and the port. And you don't want to pull in the upward direction because then you risk damaging the port. You want to pull it out straight, level with the port. From our old glass, we'll need to salvage the home button assembly as well as a top metal camera bracket, as these will be installed on our replacement glass. Both of these parts are held on with adhesive, so it'll be helpful to apply some heat before we pry them free. We'll start by removing the home button, which is composed of 2 components. The actual switch, which is located behind the glass, and the plastic button that you see on the outside, which activates this switch. Both of these parts are held on with a slight adhesive and can be peeled away using your metal pry tool. The top metal camera bracket is removed in the same manner as we did with the home button. Our next task will be to remove all remaining glass and adhesive from the perimeter of the device. This can be accomplished using a combination of heat, the metal pry tool, and the small Phillips screwdriver. The adhesive is black, however do not mistake the Wi-Fi and 3G cables as being adhesive. It's common for one or more corners to be dented during the fall that cracked the screen. If this is the case, in order to accommodate the new glass, you'll need to bend out the casing with the pliers, cut out a chunk of the bezel, or scrape away at the bezel to accommodate the new glass. The chosen method will depend on the extent of the damage. We'll now prep our replacement glass by reinstalling the home button assembly and top metal camera bracket. The home button and top metal camera bracket should stick using the original adhesive. However, the actual home button circuit includes 2 pre-cut strips for re-adhering it to the new glass. If either the top metal camera bracket or the home button seen on the outside do not stick using their original adhesive, you can use a small amount of super glue gel, which is included with the repair toolkit. It's important to verify that the home button was installed correctly by peeling back the front plastic and clicking the home button. You'll feel it click like normal if it was successfully installed. Finally, apply heat to both areas so that the adhesive becomes extra tacky for a strong bond. We'll now be applying our pre-cut double-sided adhesive around the perimeter of the device. It's important that the adhesive does not overlap the bezel. By running your small flathead up against the bezel and pushing down on the adhesive, it'll prevent this from occurring. The next minute of footage will detail where each individual adhesive strip goes around the perimeter. Our next step will be to plug in the digitizer cable from our replacement screen. We'll start by tucking the cable inside the casing as it was before, and then we'll line up the cable outside the port so that we can slide it in up until the white line. Be sure that the cable is inserted completely or the digitizer will not function properly. It may take some effort because you don't have much space to work with, but be careful not to bend the cable too much or tear it in any area. Now we can carefully flip the black tabs down so that they sit in the horizontal direction, holding the cable in place with tension and securing all connections. If either of these tabs becomes disconnected, you may find it hard to find a replacement. If they snapped in half, you will have to replace them. However, if they're in one piece, it's possible to reinstall them, but it will take some effort. The digitizer will not function properly without these 2 tabs. Our next step is to reinstall the LCD screen. Remember to be careful about getting fingerprints on the screen. We'll go ahead and line up the cable outside the port, just like we did with the digitizer cable. We'll insert the cable and be sure that it's plugged in all the way. And then we can go ahead and flip the digitizer latch back down so that it holds the cable in place with tension and secures all connections. Now the same goes for this tab as with the digitizer. If this tab breaks off, the LCD will not function properly, and you'll need to replace the tab if it was broken, or reinstall it if possible. We'll flip the screen back into place, and you'll notice that some of the tape overlaps, so we'll need to tuck the LCD underneath this tape. Also, some of the screw mounts have overlapping tape, so we'll need to either cut the tape out from these areas or peel it away to accommodate our LCD screen. We'll now go ahead and reinstall the 4 Phillips screws holding the LCD in place. Before we remove the backing from the adhesive, we should flip our glass over and power up our iPad to test the following. Is there any issue with the LCD screen? Dead pixels, bleeding, cracks? Is there any dead spots in the touchscreen? Can you open up all icons? Does the Wi-Fi and Bluetooth antenna work? Does the power, mute, and volume keys function? Is a home button functional? Does the new glass fit flush? Or does the casing need to be bent slightly outward to accommodate the new glass? Does the headphone jack work? Is the microphone working? Does the front and rear facing camera function? If it's a 3G version, does it detect the SIM card? Can you pick up a 3G signal? Be sure that all these are functional. If you encounter any issues, you may need to replace additional parts in order to get your iPad fully functional. Before continuing, you should power the iPad back down. Our next step is to remove the paper backing from all double-sided adhesive strips around the perimeter. Here we'll be applying superglue gel on top of the double-sided adhesive to make for a stronger bond. Now this won't be permanent since it's in between the glass and the adhesive, so if we ever need to replace the glass in the future, the glue will come off with the old adhesive strips. Now it's important to use a gel and not regular superglue because regular superglue will run in places where you don't want it to go. Here we're using a small flathead screwdriver to apply small dabs of the superglue gel on top of the double-sided strips at 1/4 inch spacing apart. You should continue with this method around the entire perimeter of the device. Here we're using compressed air to remove any remaining dust from the surface of the LCD screen. The replacement glass includes a protective shield on the inside, which will be peeling off immediately before closing the glass. Before we go to flip our screen over, it's important to note how the cable should be bent when the device is closed. Here's a look at the orientation of the cable and how it should be folded when you go to close your iPad. We're ready to close up our screen. Quickly remove the protective shield from the inside of the glass. Fold the screen up, and we'll first be setting the left portion of the glass flush with the bezel. Once that portion is flush, we can continue with folding our screen down as if closing a book. Work your way around the glass and ensure that it's flush on all sides. Apply a light pressure to secure the bond with the glass and the adhesive. Finally, we'll apply small plastic clamps around the perimeter of the glass and let it set for up to 1 hour. You can find all the parts and tools necessary for this repair on our website, gadgetmenders.com. We also offer a full line of service, so if this is something you don't feel comfortable doing on your own, feel free to send it in.